So hello and welcome to this video on the 100 grit from Schlappi Engineering. Now up front, I'd like to thank Schlappi Engineering for sponsoring this video. Now this is a 4-pole filter at its core with resonance compensation, so you don't lose low end when we're adding resonance. We have 2 inputs that even on the clean main output can drive and push into some lovely character and saturation. 2 FM inputs, one with attenuation, one without. CV for the resonance with a mount control, and CV for the gain for the VCA that is after the filtering stage. I mentioned the normal clean output. We also have a distorted output that has a ×100 switch, which is momentary as well as on or off, which is something that I like. As I quoted, the normalization's what really makes this special. We have 2 pole outputs which aren't available routed back into these control points, feedback around the distortion, and an image on screen is showing you the circuit diagram of what's going on the module. This next image also shows you what each of these brass balls does and how you might want to play them. They're quite easy and nicely laid out to play with a single finger, to come across the module, or to be turning a knob and playing with the brass points for a noise solo, something suggested by Eric Schlappi himself in a recent interview video that is on my channel. Now with such a varied unit from clean to obliteration, there's lots of patches, so the timing index is on screen if you want to skip around. There's little patch breaks in between the patches where I'm not talking, just to give you more tone and sound from this thing, and less of my voice. Without further ado, let's check out how it sounds. So in this patch we'll look at a few different things. The first just being some simple, clean filtering. Maybe not what you'd think of the 100 grit for, but with two square waves here, one with some PWM and one sub. We can get some lovely, still characterful, but clean filtering. Now I can push this VCA output stage. More level and some saturation. We can also turn up the CV for the VCA as opposed to the VCA's actual level and get an alternative sound. Far less low end, but that normalisation from the 2-pole part of this circuit into the CV of the VCA gives an interesting alternative colour. We could also just push both of them up. For the extra bit of character and more level. Now I also want to look at volt per octave tracking. Nothing states here that it is volt per octave tracking, but the FM input 2 simply goes straight through to the filter core, and to get that cutoff moving with the pitch of my oscillator, I'm simply going to take this volt per octave sequence into FM2. And we're retaining the wave shape we've created with the filtering across those various pitches. Add a bit of resonance to emphasize this. You can see that resonance is now moving in sequence with the pitch of my oscillator. So here's a Demented acid type sound. I was searching for some 303-ish acid, wanting this more Demented, bulbous driven, weird 303 through a distortion pedal. Let's just play around for a moment. So I'll lose the drums and the sidechain, and let's just listen to the 100 grit. So there's some Demented acid for you. So here's a really beautiful tone that's based around AM synthesis. This is simply one sine wave into the gain and another to the input, so the VCA is giving us AM synthesis. As I drop the VCA level on this modulator, so it's dynamic, it's being changed by that looping envelope, got this nice percussive feel, and it's a really lovely clean tone, but there's lots of ways that we can impart more character into this. Simply pushing the input. Even on this cleaner output, gives us this extra bit of character. Again, going fully in with a non-modulated modulator. The mix of that softer saturation and AM is really beautiful tone. Now pushing this further, some of the normalised features in brackets here, so normalising some distortion feedback. Let's add a little bit of this more distorted resonance path. Drop the cutoff. subtlety and interactions in the 100 grit really kind of shining, I think, in this patch. So in this patch we'll look at two things: the different resonance sounds with the resonance bias, and the CV control, which normalizes the internal distortion to kind of unstable amplifier in the circuit to the resonance for a different character. And we'll also look at resonance compensation and keeping in those lower fundamental frequencies which we don't lose at higher resonance settings. My input is a saw wave, and I've got an envelope into FM1. Very simple, basic filter sound. Now adding some resonance. It's already very characterful, but as we play around with this internal normalization from distortion 2, so here we'll look at audio rate modulation, but taking a slightly clipped off sine and using our audio rate modulation source into FM input 1, cut off halfway down, and because these are locked in quite stable tuning, get some really interesting wave shapes. It's certainly nothing like a sine anymore. And with this set exactly as it is, I'll play around with the tuning of this blue modulation source. Let's add some resonance to emphasize this. And there's some really amazing shaping to be had. Instead of FM, frequency modulation of the cutoff, the frequency of the filter, we could do AM, modulate the gain. Let's listen to that on the distorted output. Less gain. And FM one more time. So here we're going to look at dirtier filtering or distorted filtering, but from a little bit of a different angle, removing my modulation and the reverb for now. What's coming in is actually quite clean. Adding this moving envelope. It's already a nice interesting character, but as I start to turn up, say, FM or the resonance CV that has these distorted normalizations, let's get some verb back on. We can go from clean to not just distortion, but odd feedback normalizations that really start to dig in and destroy the sound. So here I'm going to look at synthesizing percussion. Have a single envelope going into the gain CV, everything else is down. So as I turn the resonance up, and we can clean that up. I'm on the distorted output here. We get some nice, simple, soft sounding kicks. But even without any resonance, and just touching those brass points, there's some really interesting noise effects. The normalizations from various bits of feedback in the circuit also give us some interesting sounds. I mean, single envelope to gain CV there, and it's already kind of fighting against itself. I don't know where that little rhythm's come from. So pushing into the feedback, there's definitely a lot to be had from this. The question of VCA before or after a filter comes up quite regularly in modular discussions, and the answer, like most things in Eurorack, is to do both, or have both. Now the VCA is after the filter on the 100 grit, but without that, I have two inputs. One with a different gate pattern and envelope processing my main triangle wave. It's then being distorted and adding these harmonics. And then the envelope is controlling an external VCA before it comes into input 1, and also the FM, the cutoff of the 100 grit. My second input, again, is going through its own VCA with a different envelope. So together, I've already got a dynamic input. Turning down the gain and just adding a 16th note envelope, you can see those different envelopes and the resulting effect on the audio by using VCAs before 100 grit and after. And you can hear that any of the kind of grit and character is allowed to breathe because of those dynamics on the input, and then get chopped up on 100 grits, own VCA at the end. It's a concept that's often called double gating, using two VCAs. It just allows us to be dynamic on the way in and the way out. Now, as you may suspect, this can be a great little noisemaker all on its own. And like with any kind of feedback-based system, it can be unstable, little rhythms can emerge. It's an interesting thing to explore, so I will show some other patches without me talking with that, but just know there's a whole range of noise making simply taking an output from the 100 grit. Now the 100 grit isn't billed as a CV processor, but I thought I'd push it around and see if I could get it to be one. There's quite a lot of signal loss when we go sub-audio rates with our inputs, but here I'm inputting a decaying envelope, patching another decaying envelope to the FM and a lot of negative voltage to the other FM input. And you can hear and see we're getting these wobbles on top of the envelopes. But much like 100 grit destroys audio, it's certainly wobbling and destroying this CV that I'm putting in as well. So that's it for this video on the 100 grit. Do check out the links in the description for more. Leave a comment, come and join my growing and amazing community around my Patreon channel, link in the description. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.